And here we are at the end of Google Authorship. Now what? Hangout on Air. And I am Joshua Berg. I'm hosting this event. So we've had some very interesting news this last week about Google Authorship. And I've invited my esteemed guests here to talk about this. And I think it's going to be very interesting, to say the least. So any of you that have questions are welcome to post them as we go along. And so I've got Mark Trappigan here, and David Amerland, Ben Fisher, and we have two more guests that will be coming in a little bit later. That's AJ and Eric. So let's get started. Mark Trappigan, I'd like to talk to you about this first because you have been the most involved in the authorship scene, talking and teaching about it. You want to tell us a little bit about your background with that, and then let us know what you are thinking about this?
Well, my background with it is I've been intrigued with everything Google was doing in regard to this, especially when Google Plus came out, joined it on its third day, and when I started to get an inkling of what Google Plus might be beyond just another social network. And it was easy to see, for me at least, pretty early on, that Google was wanting to set up something that would encourage people to establish profiles. They would be identifying themselves to Google in a way, and in a significant way. And when it was announced that the authorship program, which was actually announced a month before Google Plus, that it would now be, that Google would be implementing it through connections to Google Plus profiles, that caught my attention right away. I was intrigued with this whole idea. Why would Google want to know that? Why would they want to know, where your content is, and all the possibilities that they might someday do with that? So I just began to watch it, track it, learn everything about it that I could, become an observer of it from the earliest days. And then, as all of you know, when communities came out, I started the Google Plus authorship and author rank community, which has done very well. Going up, we have 28,000 members. It's been a very active and great community, just exchanging ideas, learning about it, helping people to try to implement the authorship. But overall, it was an interesting experiment to watch, and that's what I've been calling it all week. It was an experiment. In one sense, I said to somebody today, I think everything that Google does is an experiment. It's just, some experiments have more investment than others. And as an experiment, I think you say, if you're a scientist, and Google are first and foremost scientists, if you're a scientist, there's no such thing as a failed experiment. Even an experiment that doesn't produce the results you wanted, in the end, you learn something from, and you get something from it. Google carried this out for 3 years. That's longer time than a lot of the experiments that they've done, and they poured a lot more investment into it than a lot of other experiments have done. Some of us, we could quibble over they could have done more. They could have done more to promote it. They could have done more to make it easier to implement, etc. But they certainly gave it the old college try for 3 years. At the end of the day, people have all kinds of speculations and theories about why they ended it, and I'll be the first to admit we can't fully know what happened or why it was ended. But I think the big statement that we can say is that when you're doing an experiment like this, you evaluate it and you say, is it producing the results that we wanted? Is it worth the investment? And there is an investment because Google, as big as their resources are, their data processing resources are not infinite. They're not unlimited. They do have to be budgeted. And their time and people resources. that to go into maintaining a project like this have to be. The other question that they ask is it enhancing the user interface? Is it making search better? And I know, again, I've been responding to a lot of cynics this past week who say all it was about was, it was getting in the way of the ads, and they just want to clear everything out of search just so people will click on ads. I don't know what to say to people that say that, other than if you don't understand that Google's investment in the quality of the search results is a profit motive. It is their bread and butter. They're smart enough to realize that if you're going to get the billions of dollars from those ads that they get, and you're going to continue to get that for years to come, you've got to continue to up your quality continuously, because that's what brings people back. That's what keeps them using the search engine. So a lot more, that I could say on it. That's kind of the big general statement I'd make first.
Yes, and then in the Hangout that I was in with John Mueller earlier the other day, he specifically mentioned Google's concern about simplifying the algorithms and making things run faster, and the efficiency of it. So, it's more important for people to get those search results fast. Fractions of a second can make a difference, and it's more important that people get all those results quickly than that the different bells and whistles and or any other future features, however useful they might be, are added on. So if a feature is not receiving wide enough adoption, or is not as useful or accepted by other users, then that feature might have to go in favor of the speed and the simplification of the algorithms.
Right. And if you look at it from Google's standpoint, right? I mean, they don't have, by the way, the show could be over because Mark just said pretty much everything we need to know. Thanks, Mark.
There's much more. Can
we all go home now, right?
Yeah, we're done. But speaking to computational power, right? Just coming from the hosting industry, even companies like GoDaddy do not have unlimited resources. They've got multiple data centers, they've got clustering, they've got custom servers that they've built. They don't have an unlimited amount of bandwidth. So, we talk about this as it was an experiment, and I wholeheartly agree with that. Google's experimenting with things all the time. We saw it with Buzz. We saw it with Orchid back in the day. Everything is an experiment, and they usually end up taking that data and putting it into something useful down the line. Like for instance, how Buzz, a lot of the features of Buzz ended up actually getting rolled into Google Apps. But if we take a look at the fact that Google needs to look at things from a very objective standpoint, we have to look at the numbers. And Mark, this actually comes from the article that you did in Search Engine Land with Eric. Just looking at the one aspect, which is the adoption rate, and that is the Google Plus profile implementation. Out of the sample set, you had 48% with no profile. So it's a sample set of 500 authors across 150 media sites, right? Major media sites. 48% had no Google Plus profile. 22% had a profile but no link to a publishing website. And 30% had a profile with one or more links to a publishing website. And you add on top of that the fact that this rel equals contributor itself is missing, and also the numbers, which I don't have the, here we go, which are basically on the sites that you were looking at, 65% attempted to implement authorship markup. 77% of those had errors. 92% didn't show up as rich snippets. It was clunky. There was a lot of mistakes made. People weren't implementing it correctly. So it makes a lot of sense for Google to objectively take a look at it and say, this just isn't working. And for the people who are implementing it, which is a pretty low sample set across their big data, it's being implemented either incorrectly or it's just basically the data is bad. And
that's an important factor there, Ben, because that you brought up, because that I think was probably in the mix as well. Because what people need to understand is Google, in order to put something in the search and to say this is an important factor, and they were doing that, even if it was never a ranking factor, which I don't believe it was in any real way, it still, in a sense, was, because when you put a rich snippet on something, you put a photo on it, you put stars around it, you put blinking lines, whatever you're going to put around it, in the search results, you're implicitly saying this deserves to stand out. This deserves more attention than other things. You have to remember, Google started out with a very simple concept. You rank things. The stuff that's at the top should be the most important or the best, and so on down the page, right? The 10 blue links.
Yep.
When they started adding in all these bells and whistles, the rich snippets, all these kinds of search features, now you're getting the users getting multiple signals thrown at them. It's what are you saying to me here, Google? You're saying, is the top one really the best anymore? Is this one with an author photo next to it the best? And I think part of it may have been that Google decided at the end of the day that they couldn't really stand behind that. They couldn't say, just because we've got a photo next to this or we've given this person an authorship byline, we can't really say at this point that's a better result or that's a more authoritative result. I think they're working toward wanting to be able to do that, but it wasn't there yet. So you're sending a bad signal. And one more thing I'll just say about that is also when it's incomplete signal, when you can't see all of it as accurately, it's not good, because it's just not fair. If you're saying we're going to emphasize the X% of people who are connecting correctly to it and who we're pretty sure about, but then we're going to ignore the people that don't, and in that sample of people that aren't using it or we don't have the profile for, there are probably many, many authors who are as good or better and who would deserve to rank. So when you have an incomplete signal, you can't really use it.
Yeah, and Mark, I think what you're saying about sometimes there's too much there for users, but also we don't know what else Google has in the works and that they're planning to add on. Like just today, earlier they announced a new change.
The search boxes.
Yeah,
the search boxes. So, and then you've got the different things that are being added in from the knowledge graph and also the knowledge vault. So you've got all these different features, etc., being put in, and then you've got the authorship pictures, and who knows how confusing it is. I'm sure Google has done plenty of studies and analyzing of that.
But if I may, Joshua.
Yeah, Ben.
If I may, Joshua. I mean, I think that this brings up, to kind of close this portion of the subject out, it really brings up that something that I think, well, that I know David is an expert at, and that is veracity. Well, actually, David, I mean, can you want to speak to veracity and?
Yeah, actually, I think it's fascinating that Josh brought up John's comment about speed, because essentially semantic search and Google's increasingly intelligent search relies on specific things. It relies on speed, it relies on scale, and then relies on accuracy, which is where the veracity factor comes in. And semantic search as a whole goes on volume, variety, velocity, and veracity. And veracity, the truthfulness of facts, is a bugbear. Mark quite rightly said, if you have incomplete signals, it creates a muddy picture. And here's what's happening right now. And Google very recently, I was talking to Bill Slosky about this, and he mentioned that Google's taken a patent, something called semantic frameworks. And essentially a semantic framework is a set of concepts which come together to make up another concept. And if only one of those elements is missing, then the entire thing collapses. And to give an example, suppose, for instance, you look for your local pizza restaurant and you want the best restaurant in town, which is near you, and you find it, it's right next to you, right? And it's got everything. It's got the recipes, it's got the pizza, it's got the opening hour, it's got the place. And what it doesn't have is good reviews. Let's say it's got 50 bad reviews. Suddenly, that missing element stops that entity being the best pizza restaurant in town for you. It's a pizza restaurant, but it doesn't fit in the best, because that element is missing, and the whole sort of semantic framework collapses around it. And that is an increasingly difficult thing to do at scale. Google is trying to tackle this across a variety of ways using different means. And historically, Google has shied away from the human element because it brings in a number of incremental and aggregated errors, which come in, some because people are trying to game the system, and some because we simply get tired and make mistakes. And case in point, the statistics cited by you, Ben, on the incorrect implementation of authorship, where you would argue that we had all the incentive to actually implement it correctly, and okay, it was not the easiest thing to do, but it was not rocket science either. And the fact that so many failed and the uptake wasn't very strong speaks volumes about how weak we are sometimes at doing the right thing across the web, and Google quite rightly mistrusts that. And
yeah, David, I was watching the Hangout you did the other day with Mark and Eric and someone brought up, I think Mark, you did, regarding the authorship, the amount of authors who might be considered high authority and influential in their fields, etc., would be a rather elite group of authors. So, I mean, David, what do you think about that when you're looking at scale, and then you're looking at all the different elements that you want to bring into search, and then these new authors, and then you've got this very small amount of those authors that are in the going to be in this high authority area, then it doesn't seem to become overall that useful.
Yeah, you're quite right, and I'm very glad again you're highlighting this, because essentially exactly the problem is that all the signals that Google uses these days have come to be almost in a very semantic search, relationally corroborative of each other, which means that the linear cause and effect or correlative factors we used to see in the search of the past, or the search engine optimization techniques of the past, have now largely disappeared. Now, you do a lot of things, and those things have to come together in order for it to make sense. And the way they come together depends on the site, depends on the context, depends on the situation, depends on a lot of different factors, which are almost unique for each business vertical or every website, which is where your comment comes in, really, to actually have a signal that is imprecise, certainly elitist at some point, implemented correctly by people who totally understand it, but perhaps don't bring in a lot of value to the industry, is not really what Google was looking for. And the fact that they stuck it out for so long, Mark said they're a data company. They absolutely are. They look at data right across the web. And semantic search, unlike the search of the past, is actually geared to take on board change on the fly, depending on the data coming in, and move directly from there into a new direction. And this is exactly what we saw here.
Right. I mean, and I think that one way to sum that up, David, I mean, is that, kind of like what we did almost a year ago, is that it allows Google to basically adapt. And it allows, like you said, adapt on the fly, so therefore searches don't become irrelevant and become much more relevant.
Exactly.
Which is why I'm personally looking so much forward to the knowledge vault. I'm kind of scared of it too. I'm scared of it too at the same time, right? Because it's going to have that capacity to maybe be gamed or present incorrect information, kind of like how Freebase does currently.
Something interesting that John mentioned in his Hangout the other day, and it was prior to the portion of the event where we actually talked about authorship. But the question was brought up about click-through rates and how those are looked at by Google, and a lot of SEO guys have run different experiments on that, and, but Google typically hasn't said said much about that. Anyway, John was explaining that the click-through results are important to Google in like the overall scheme, looking at the big data. So if a user comes and is looking for different search results, and they click on the first search result, well then Google's probably doing pretty well with the search results. Whereas if they're typically clicking on a lot of the other search results, or looking around, or the bounce back to the search results happens quickly, then Google wants to look at their algorithms. So in other words, he was explaining it's not necessarily going to be used on a link by link, query by query type of scale, but overall it is used as a kind of a corroborating factor as to the direction and the usefulness of the algorithms. So I bring this up, and this is something that John Mueller did not say or confirm to me, but I bring this up because we've talked about and believe that the authorship results had a higher CTR rate, at least in the earlier stage, and maybe later on that click-through rate went down, and that may be because people didn't see enough value in that rate. I mean, just because someone's authorship picture was there did not necessarily mean that was the best result, and that's why I'm, thinking the authorship pictures there. If Google's looking at the data sets of all of the CTR overall, and then is seeing a steady decline of the authorship CTR, or maybe a user fatigue in that, or anything like that. I mean, they can see the big picture of that. Then that would be part of when Google adds on the different other features. Then looking at the CTR rates of those overall would be an important factor in deciding which of those features to keep, and which of different ways that the algorithms could be adjusted. And
right.
having too much there may just confuse it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Google takes into account, I think, a lot of different things, CTR being one thing, but we're also talking about bounce rates, how long has somebody stayed on the page, have they clicked through to other pages. So, yeah, Mark, David, do you have any thoughts on click-through rate?
Well, yeah,
I'm talking about click-back rate as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Josh has made an important point here, because intuitively we think that if you see a picture on the web associated with a result in search, you would automatically click to it because it's a response factor, and perhaps depending on your brand recognition of the person featured in that, there's also a trust factor there. But we do know that as we become more sophisticated web users, and this is brand new territory, these are new things we see and we become accustomed to, we develop our own sort of methodologies of dealing with the information overload we get. And case in point is banners in the past. We've all become banner blind. You get the website. It used to be that anything that flashed, anything that was big, anything that was different color, you clicked on it instantly. And now nobody actually sees them. You put banners on the website, people just filter them out because they have learned that they're not really relevant, they're a distraction, and they focus on the things which actually matter to them. I have discussed the disappearance of the authorship photographs when it first happened, whether it was a UI issue only because of mobile search, or it was deeper than that. And there were a lot of suggestions that essentially, if you're already in the industry, if you're already using search to find people, then you already know who your trustworthy contacts are. A picture is unlikely to sway you one way or another, and you're only using it as a shortcut to actually, finding the result a little bit faster. If you are sort of not looking for that, if you see pictures of people you don't know, it's not going to increase your trust factor in them. You are more likely to filter them out after a while because you don't know them, and there's no associated sort of brand equity with that. And I think this is the kind of human behavior approaches which we need to quantify as we move forward into this very new realm, because they impact on search decisions and on search programming. And that's exactly what we're seeing here, even from our own experience, but also anecdotal evidence and what John said.
And as a possible confirmation of that, it's very interesting that we've seen, as many people have observed, that author-style photos, authorship-rich snippet type results, are showing still in what we call here personalized search, logged-in search for Google Plus content. And that's always been, but people are noticing it a lot more. And we have AJ Cohn with us now. But people are noticing that it's standing out to them. First of all, because they may not have even realized before that there was a difference between their logged-in personalized search and their logged-out search. Now that the authors are gone entirely, the fact that their Google Plus friends, people they have circled, are showing up with that snippet, it really stands out to them. They're noting it. But more to the point of what you were just talking about, David, that may be, I don't want to read too much into that, but it may be a significant indication. Obviously, if that's remained, Google thinks there is value there. There's value to seeing an author photo and a byline when there's a chance that you know the person or you have some connection to them. If you've added them to a circle at some point, you have some kind of connection. There's a better chance, and that's been for me personally. I can say the personalized Google Plus results being elevated in my search have much more frequently been actually useful to me than the general authorship results out there. If I'm,
Mark, that's the bingo.
AJ's walking the room here. If I'm, in the early days, if I was searching about something about authorship or author rank, when AJ was writing a lot more about that, having him pop up something that he wrote pop up in my search results, incredibly useful because I already know that he was an authority on that. If I search semantic search, now I get David's Google Plus post popping up. Extremely useful to me right away. That's what I want to see.
Yeah. And we don't know the number of people that are using search logged in, but presumably it's
well, we have the it's imprecise, but we have the tracking of help me out here, not provided.
Oh yeah, right.
And now that number's muddled now because they added in people searching on Chrome are also encrypted. But for people who don't know, just quickly, that's if you use Google Analytics and you look in your you used to be able to see almost all, you never really saw all of the queries that people actually typed in when they search for your site, and that they click on, brings them to your site. Now, an increasingly large percentage of that shows is not provided because Google made a decision that when people search encrypted, meaning they're logged into Google, Google is going to encrypt, I should say it this way, when people log into Google, Google is going to encrypt their searches, supposedly to protect their information, and that therefore their query data is not going to be passed on through analytics. Well, long story short, tracking that, there's a site called, I think it's called notprovided.com, so that they've been tracking it for 2 years now. They track 60 websites, how much is not provided. It's gone steadily up over the years. And I extrapolate from before they activated it in the Chrome browser. If it continued at the same growth, we're probably at about 60 to 70% of searches being done while logged in at this point, which is a huge number.
Yeah, it really is. So, AJ, thanks for coming. It's really great to have you here.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So this is our first, my first hangout to have you join, and so it's great to have you. Anyway, something really interesting. You wrote about, I believe it was the end of last year, about the authorship program closing down at Google, and it seemed, I mean, at the time, I saw that, I was like, you know, more of the sky is falling stuff. But you know, looking back now, there's were definitely some strong indications there that you know, a part of the authorship program was being maybe rolled back, or at least was completed, because some of these guys weren't around. What was the situation you found with that?
Yeah, I mean, two people left. First, it was Sagar. Sagar Kangar went to Project X at Google, which was the new hotness, which I believe he was working on Project Loon, which was bringing Wi-Fi to people with balloons, some really cool, crazy stuff. But he was a pretty big part of that team, and he worked under Othar Hansen, who is a seriously, seriously smart guy who's done a whole bunch of stuff, and is a nice guy to boot. And so when Sagar left, I reached out to Othar and said, well, great, I don't want to bother you every time I have a question about authorship. Who's the new product manager that I should talk to? And Othar said, you can just talk to me. And that was the first indication, because you know, that's pretty good, a pretty good indication that it means there's no replacement, right? No more headcount for that area. And soon after that, I realized that Othar's title had changed, and he had moved on from the authorship program. And he was working over on Android. Without Othar at the helm, there was no authorship program. Zip, zilch, nada. You know, Othar was his typical Google self and saying, oh, I'm just one guy, the program can go on, yada, yada, yada. But never offering up, you know, someone else to talk to, or, oh, my replacement will be, it was done, right? And at that point...
What are your thoughts about the rollback and why
they rolled it back?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, so at that point, I think they had figured out that they were not going to get enough people to implement the markup. You know, if Neil deGrasse Tyson doesn't use authorship markup, and you do a search for astrophysicists and he doesn't show up, you can't use authorship to do anything, right? So markup was not the solution. And then I think they figured out through testing that the actual visual wasn't so hot either. You know, at the beginning it was all fun and shiny newness, but over time I think they figured out, yeah, that's not testing so hot either. You know, this just isn't really what we need to do. And at the same time, there was this other freight train running through Google, which is entities. And I think they figured out pretty quickly that markup wasn't going to be the way they were going to identify people, and people have the ability to author stuff. It was going to be done through entities. And so...
Yeah, so that's good, and that brings up the next main point. You know, what are the other ways that Google will use to identify people? And they've been using some and experimenting on some for quite a while.
And I'm gonna tip in here just to say that I'm gonna have to say goodbye. I got to go catch my flight home from Boston here. But you're in very good hands with the people that are there for those questions. So. Thanks, Joshua, for having me in on this.
Thanks so much, Mark, for coming. Really great.
See you around soon.
Have a safe trip.
Take care, Mark.
Just passing
Take care.
All right.
Thanks, Udi.
So the answer is yes. They're using a whole bunch of other stuff. But entity detection, right? I mean, they've been working on this for a long time. There were some posts actually just around the time that the authorship program went away. Actually, they released some stuff which made it clear to me that they were going to start doing this with entities, because they had these extraction scores and the ability to look at the text and disambiguate, and they were really working very hard at this. And of course, recently we've seen the Knowledge Vault, right? And very clearly seen how they're thinking about automating the various ways and databases that feed entities and how they can use them and harness them together with different types of features to sort of refine them to get to where they were. I think the biggest thing that you saw, unfortunately, when you looked at the Knowledge Vault paper, was that the schema implementations, the stuff that we put on the page, was the lousiest source of data. So
comes back to the human element again.
Right, exactly. The human element, right? We're imperfect. It turns out that parsing the actual HTML tree on the page was a lot more effective in extracting entities and resolving them to facts. So, you know, I like to tell people they know who authors are, right? You do a search for Seth Godin right now, there's a knowledge panel, and under Seth's name, guess what it says? Author, right? Pretty easy to say. They understand Seth's an author. And the reason why they can do this is they have access to you know, a database of books, and books are classified by ISBN numbers. And those ISBN numbers have authors, and those authors can be linked, and it's all linked data. And so they can make those connections, and they can then show, this is Seth, we know who Seth is, he's an author, and these are the books he's written. Very easy to do. The next step will be, when does Google get to a confidence factor that they can say, this blog post is also Seth's, right? And that's the territory that I think Google wants to get to. But getting to a confidence factor where they're going to get it right 90% of the time, let's say, I think we're a long way from that, right?
Yeah.
Getting into another point, Ben, I wanted to.
I mean, even for me, like, look up my name, right? I've got doppelgangers. I've got one somewhat famous doppelganger. He's a skateboarder, right? So if someone says, okay, AJ Cohn, what does he do? I'm a skateboarder, right?
Yeah. I've got a skateboarder too. That's kind of funny. Then there's a Ben Fisher, famous skateboarder out there.
Yeah. So, oddly enough,
you guys don't need any work.
Maybe I should start skateboarding. I don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
To be semantically correct.
So I think that's the main way. I do think when you look at how the Knowledge Vault is being constructed and how Google's going to extract entities, there are two main ways that you can influence things. One is, you know, obviously writing well and marking up your pages, right? So just making it, you know, use those nouns instead of pronouns, and use the markup so that it's, you know, readable to Googlebot. Googlebot is always your last persona. That's I'll take that blatantly from Mike King, who uses that. I think it's a beautiful one. Googlebot is always your last persona. And then the other one is go in and start editing some of these databases. Enter that stuff in and start doing it. I'm about 75% of the way done with my Freebase editing guide. It'll be out soon, I promise. But that's the way to do it. Oddly enough, though, it looks like I was reading something that actually have some stuff about how to trust the people editing Freebase, and they have some algorithms based on that as well. So hopefully I'm doing okay.
Let's not even talk about Wikipedia then, AJ.
I tell people, if you want to wade into that you know, hornet's nest, by all means, have fun. You know, but I prefer Freebase.
Let's talk about pages publishers for a minute, because that's another aspect to this, is that the publisher markup is still in use and valid, and you know, John specifically mentioned that it is still quite useful and is being used in different ways. And Ben, because you work with pages a lot and you know, are familiar with some of the data around that. What are your thoughts about those comments?
Okay, so let's start with numbers, right? I'm going to actually use only one number, and it's from our data set. Out of over 20,000 pages that we've analyzed over the past year, 53% of those pages have properly implemented rel equals publisher. I think that's mainly due in part to how well Google has allowed brands basically to put up, say, a rel equals publisher badge. 7 out of 10 times I see the actual brand page badge on somebody's website. They're not actually using, say, the link rel in the head, or they're using, converse to that, is they're using a link with a rel equals publisher. So they made it really easy for brands to get involved. A couple other things about publisher, and I think why it's so important, is that it's basically the yin and yang, in a sense, to what authorship was. It's the opposite, because it's directly flowing from a brand's website into the Google Plus ecosystem. Why is this important? It comes back to veracity. A website might not have schema, like you were saying, AJ. It might not have schema implemented properly. Their structure of their website could be a mess. It could be an e-commerce shopping cart that is just, was built 10 years ago. It's still got description tags and keyword tags that are horrible, and just, whatever. There could be a lot of problems. It couldn't be crawled, maybe. Either way, whatever. There's a lot of site issues that could be going on. Publisher and Google Plus pages in general provide Google with a very succinct way of discovering information, basically, about people, entities, really all the dots that are connected from our website. And it allows you, actually, as a brand, to be able to control the information. Again, it's going into the Google Plus.
I think we're going to see pages used more now, and that people will see more value in it, and maybe that's it will encourage that direction. I mean, personally, I think that I see a higher value to pages and projects that I work with, the publishers, I mean, and I think that there will be a bigger and much better adoption. There.
And one thing that John Mueller, in that chat that you were talking about, Joshua, he said very specifically, he said, about the site issues. Google Plus, and this is his words, Google Plus is a great way to get information about a website, and it helps build the knowledge graph. Drop the mic at that point.
Yeah, that's right. So what do you guys think about for our authors out here? And some people might feel a little bit left out in the cold, or think, well, maybe we don't matter so much, or Google doesn't think we're as important now. And so what would we say in that regard, and what is the advice? So our hangout is called Now What, and that's because I think that's the question a lot of people will be asking, who in particular have focused on this, maybe too much, but they need to know what they should do, what is a good direction to be going on in with their projects. David, any thoughts about that for our
definitely.
authors?
And well, it's funny really, because it all comes back to something Google said back in 2004, where they said, focus on quality and everything else follows. And we didn't, right? Because we analyzed search and we analyzed the gimmicks and we applied them, and we kept on doing so because we could see a correlation between what we did and the results in a fairly linear fashion. And this is not the case anymore. a lot of the things which we implement now haven't got a direct linear correlation or impact on search. They instead have a combinatorial one where they need to basically sync in with a lot of other things, creating a corroborative signal, which then has an impact on search. Which brings us back to your question, what do you do? Well, simplify this, and what do? You achieve data density. And by that, essentially, the way we operate offline, we operate in an incredibly data-dense environment. Everything which you do is contextual and signal-driven, from the way you dress when you go into a conference, the way you speak to somebody whom is going to be an important business contact, to the way you sort of behave in a sort of more familiar environment. We get online, and we didn't. Hey, Eric. We basically tick boxes. We had a website, check, had so many pages, well, then it has some content. Well, here's the content, so many words and so many keywords, but this is not data density at all. Data density essentially helps establish what AJ said, helps extract information that helps build an entity about you. It helps basically fill in the blanks about who you are and what you do, and it helps search understand that you are a real person doing real things that have real impact with a high level of confidence, which is again the veracity factor that Ben mentioned earlier. And all these things need to come together through the relatively simple thing that everything which you do online now needs to be as carefully thought through and then as carefully established as everything which you do offline. So to take it to a website level, if you're going to have some sort of razzmatazz in your website because you can and technology allows you to, the first question has to be, well, does it benefit my end user, and does it reflect the quality and values which I want to present? And if the answer is no, that shouldn't be there. Take that to your content, and again, you ask the same questions, and that again changes everything about how you write, the way you speak, the content you generate, the information you put in there. Take that to your social signal and your interaction with social networks, and that turns your marketing into something else entirely. So these are the things which should be the guiding factor forever now, not just the next thing, because we're going to see more and more change. Part of semantic search is the ability of Google to essentially take out parts of it on the fly and bring in other parts, and this is exactly what we saw with Authorship. So it's not over. We're going to see a lot more changes as we go through, and they shouldn't throw us. So we should be able to, business as usual, provided we really understand what it is we're doing. If we're not, then we're constantly chasing the next big thing.
Yeah, I actually think it's a good thing, because I think people stop chasing the image, stop chasing the craft, yes, and start doing the work that actually needs to be done. I wrote a piece, kind of out of frustration, where I said, build your authority, don't build your author. Right?
I saw that, yeah.
It's about authority. It's about audience. It's about every piece of content that you produce should convert at least one person to a true fan. If you haven't read Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans, stop watching this Hangout. Sorry, Josh. Look it up and read it now. That's what it's about, right?
And it's what it should have always been about, right? Absolutely. I mean, it should have been about that from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
Because we know that Google is going to bring signals in and Google's going to bring signals out, but what Google's really trying to do is measure the way people measure authority and value, right? And so that algorithm that they might use at any given point in time will change. But if you keep focused on building your own authority and value and reputation, then over time, as Google makes changes, it should be good for you.
Yeah, and so
Eric, we were talking about the different people who've been kind of surprised, wondering what to do next with the cancellation of Google authorship. And there's some people that have had a sky is falling kind of perception, and others who well, I've wasted a lot of time here, and so anyway.
Those who give up, to me, those who give up will lose. Those who double down will win. This is the same thing, very different topic. Matt Cutts gets done, says widgets. really bad. You can't use widgets, right? That's not actually what he said. He said bad widgets.
I'm doubling down.
Right, bad widgets.
I don't think that's what he meant.
Good widgets, good. Same thing here, right? It's, to me, doubling down, standing out from the crowd, building unique content. I'm a big fan. I'm going to present about it later this year, about hacking attention and creating memorable content. That's what it's about. Memorable content. I actually don't care if it's great or not. BuzzFeed is a perfect example. They create memorable content. Most of it's crap, but they win. And it's because they've created a memorable brand, memorable content.
So Eric, you got the early scoop on this story too, and you know that was interesting. The article you wrote was had a lot of useful ideas and perceptions. You want to give a little summary of the important aspects you saw about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I assume Mark was on earlier and he had to drop off before I got on. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
So he might have talked a little bit about it, but I'll call out a couple of aspects that I was more involved in. One of the things that we had done is we did a study, and I actually led this study where we looked at 150 different websites. And across those websites, we looked at 500 different authors, and of those 500 authors, 70% of them did basically no attempt to participate in the authorship program. So they either didn't have a Google Plus profile, or if they did not implement links from their profiles to the sites where they were publishing, right?
Right, and we did talk about the low adoption rate as being one of the important issues. Any other significant issues that you see there?
Well, so it also was true on the site side, and you know these are all major journals, right? That we looked at, and you know they weren't engaging in implementing authorship very well. A lot of major newspapers made no attempt at all, like 50 out of the 150 we looked at. But I also think that other things that I like to emphasize here is that, in fact, John Mueller said it. I can't remember if it was in his post on Google Plus or his conversation he had with Mark or both. But given the end user benefit that they felt authorship was delivering, the computing resources that they were expending to get that benefit weren't justified. So, and the funny thing about this is so many people out there, they think that Google has unlimited processing resources. Far from it. I mean, and I'll just give you a different example to illustrate, because it's interesting. If you have Google image search open, and you drag a picture of the Taj Mahal and drop it into the search box, Google image search will recognize that it's the Taj Mahal. But in web search, they don't try to do that because it's too much processing power. So it's not that they can't do it. It's too much work, and it's just a demonstration that their processing power is very limited. And this was really a big factor, in my opinion. Google has better ways to spend their processing power than trying to figure out screwed up markup in order to show a byline in the search results. And I suspect that the grinning fellow who's either in Greece or England at the moment, or maybe it's Singapore, Lord knows where he is in the globe right now, Mr. Amerland, could suggest some better ways for them to spend that processing power. Well, all of us on the panel could, of course. But I'm just picking on him because he's the guy who's always talking about semantic search.
A lot of people have no idea how
it's
fast
always fun, David.
Yeah.
I mean, content is growing exponentially. It's
oh, yeah, totally. That's just another thing by itself. You're exactly right, Joshua. I mean, it's like it was in 2012 that at PubCon Las Vegas, Matt Cutts told me that Google knew of 100 trillion web pages. And by now, it has to be 500 trillion. The growth rate of that stuff is crazy, right? I mean, David Amerlin adds 1 million a year himself from his articles. I'm picking on you all the time now, David, and I got to pick on everybody else here before I'm done.
That's right.
So
that's what caffeine was about, though. I mean, caffeine was about that future. They understood that they were content avalanche was coming, and that batch indexing was not going to cut it.
Totally. You're absolutely right. But also, that Hummingbird was the sister of this, right? Hummingbird was really about how do we take this really rickety code structure that we haven't updated, because Hummingbird is the crawling technology. Caffeine was the crawling technology. Hummingbird is the search technology and the algorithms and all that stuff, and enabling the semantic and voice signals, but really also improving the platform for all the signals. That was all structuring for this crazy future that we're crashing headlong into. So, I mean, I could rant, by the way, for another 20 minutes here, so you got to interrupt me if I get way off topic.
About the in-depth articles feature that has been discussed, because the in-depth articles have been typically, I mean, we know that they've used author rank and have been looked at as more important than other types of articles. AJ, where do you see those moving forward?
So yeah, I have. I might be a little controversial in this area, because I know that they say, oh well, we used authorship in the in-depth articles, right? And I think this is sort of like their CYA, because I think maybe it had a small part to play in it. I actually think publisher had a lot more to do with it. I mean, these are whitelisted sites. There's no doubt about it, in my opinion. And the bylines, to my knowledge, have never been authors. They've always been sites, right? It's always New York Times, Wall Street Journal, The Verge, whatever, right? Maybe once I look at those sites as Google, I pick the actual content from that site, and maybe part of that is an authorship, element. But I think I saw a lot of people pointing to in-depth articles as like, but see, it still lives. Author rank, it's there. It's like, no, it doesn't. Please, it's over. Not there either, right? Because I guarantee you, and I haven't done the test, and I should do the test. I know I should. Eric, you should do the test then. Mark up the site. Mark it up for in-depth articles. I guarantee you, you're not going to get it. I'm not going to get it, because I'm not the New York Times. You're not the Atlantic. We're not the Wall Street Journal, right? It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I have noticed that. It doesn't seem to be an area that many sites have been able to break into.
Not only that, but has anybody looked at the dates on that stuff? You do a search for something, and it's like 2011, 2008. I mean, is this of use to anybody?
There's also another factor in it too, and that is that some of these authors on these major sites have no Google Plus presence whatsoever.
Right.
Empty profiles.
Yeah, exactly. So I look at that, and I think in-depth articles are interesting, but I just I want to make sure people don't take the way that Google has to talk about things, because if they say that authorship wasn't part of in-depth articles, and someday it comes to light that they used 5% to do this, that, or the other thing, 20 people from the industry will jump up and say, "See, you lied," and they'll go crazy and their heads will explode. So Google has this unfortunate place where they have to really be very careful with how they talk because of a bunch of jackasses in the industry. So I want to make sure that that people don't take that small little sliver and blow it up into, authorship's still going to be used in its in-depth articles, and that's going to be the second coming of how things are going to work. My take.
Yeah. Okay. So we're getting to the end of our time here, and let's give any further advice or.
Can I offer a thought on where I think this is going?
Well, I was gonna slap her a what now and then throw it over to you, Eric. But go first. Because you're you're probably gonna say what I'm gonna say anyway. So go for it.
No, you go for it first. You actually put it in so go for it.
All right. Okay. All right. So all I was gonna say is that we don't know. Something could happen with authorship again in the long term, right? But as a kind of an action. What webmasters can do is the rel equals author link is what it is. It is just a link that is coming from your website. It's treated like any other link, whether it's follow or do follow, and it's going into your profile. That does feed information to Google in a little piece of information, right? It's just they're not tracking it like any kind of special tag. They haven't even said, what's happening with rel equals contributor yet. There's still some mystery around that. So that might be, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one too, Eric. John Mueller even, kind of said everything changes. Maybe there's going to be a Google++ one day. That's possible too. But I'd say for website owners that I can definitively say this, and I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts, is that you know what? If you put the rel equals author up there for SEO purposes only, then get rid of them. If that was your only intent, if your intent was to enrich your user's experience and show your personal authority to your users, then leave it intact, because it brings me back to you, which is more authentic. And that's what we want at the end of the day, is we want authenticity, engagement, and transparency. So that's all I got to say about that, actually.
Really great. Okay, Eric?
I first of all, I agree, but it wasn't what I was going to say, so there. So when I look at what I think is going to happen is authors are entities, and I think they care about entities. They're going to try to track them. What they found is that human contribution, in terms of talking about who authored what, or I authored this, is really bad. Participation isn't worth it. But that doesn't mean that they don't care about the entity. Here's a fact for you. They do care. They care what you write. They care who you are. They care what you think. So what that means is, if you are in your Google Plus profile, you would be a fool to not link to the sites where you write. Okay? That creates a link. They might not call it authorship markup, but they are going to track that. Now, the next question is, how are the, and by the way, you should also, on your articles, just to complete the loop, make sure that there's somewhere in your author profiles links back to your Google Plus profile. That's just information for them. It's not the authorship program. It's not authorship markup. Doesn't have any rel author to it. How they use it, probably not for right now, my take. But will they use it in some way, shape, or fashion in the future? Sure. We have a clue to what that might be, because we still do get those pretty little photos showing up in Google Plus when they're tied to direct personal connections. That's a statement there saying that in the right scenario, which is a personalization scenario, they see value in it. So you might get some personalization ranking benefits in the future. You might not. It might be broader than that. My bet is you'll never know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the personalized search aspect of it there is still highly relevant and valuable. So, David, and you got any last thoughts there on this?
Well, I can't really add very much to any of this, because everybody covered it so fantastically well. And I think the takeaway here is that if you're constantly looking to chase the changes that Google is making, you're constantly missing the picture which you should actually be following. And this has always been the bugbear in the online world. It's time we actually got away from it and past it and started producing quality content.
Yep.
Agreed. All right, AJ, you got something last to add there?
Two last quick things. I'll +1 personalization in search. I've been talking about that ever since Google Plus came out. I think way back in 2012 at MozCon, I showed the impact that Google Plus can have on personalized search. The only problem, there's very limited reporting on it, right? Can't really figure out exactly how much it's helping you. There is some evidence in Webmaster Tools. If you look closely, you can see it there, because you can see the positions, and so for very large sites which have this presence, you can see, within a 5-day period, the rank hasn't changed that much, but you're seeing differences in rank distribution. So you can see it, but it's just not well reported. The other thing would be engagement graph and activity. Google Plus is still, when you look at it, it is an activity. They use the activity streams. When you look at the activity API, they are very concerned about engagement. Ripples is the very top of that, but there's a whole host of things about, what's the original URL, who was the person who shared it, and who's commenting on it, and all that stuff, and how many +1s and where it gets shared. The engagement graph is still of great importance to Google, and I think, right now they've decided that the author level might not be the place to play, but they're certainly interested in how what you write or what is written, right, is transmitted. They will know who that is. It will probably be better resolved to the site level for the time being. But I think focusing on that and the engagement that you get is one of the other things that people can focus on. So if you're looking for those metrics to look at, to say, am I doing well? Look at, is it being commented on? Is it being reshared? Am I getting pluses on Plus? Outside of that, it should be the same on Twitter. What does it look like? All that sort of stuff. That to me is the more manifestation of how you can look at it in terms of authority. And so that would be my last sort of tip of what next. Start looking at that as your
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for coming. It's been really great to get together and talk about this. It's been a while since I talked with some of you, so it's really great to see you. And thanks to all our audience for coming and joining in with us. And let's keep moving forward. Writers keep writing, and Google Plussers keep plussing, commenting, engaging. Engagement with others is the key here.
Yeah, you get a +1 for that. Sure.
Bye now.
Take care.